Welcome, everyone, to the podcast Purpose for Life, where we explore pathways to vibrant, purposeful, and liberated life. And I'm Suzanne Roberts, your host. I'm the founder of Unifying Solutions, author of It's Deeper Than That, designer of Polarity System Design, and the upcoming The Great Reconnection. I have here with me today Monu Singh, who is both an attorney and a transformational coach. She has studied Polarity with me for the last 5 years, and we're excited to be here today. We're going to be sharing some information, and Monu's going to ask questions along the way so that it can bring clarification. There might be some terms I'm saying that I am so used to saying that aren't familiar to a lot of the world. And so she's going to help make sure that clarity comes across and that we have a way to bridge understanding with all of you. So I'm excited to have you here, Monu.
I'm so excited to be here with you and with everybody listening as well, Suzanne.
Thanks. One of the things I wanted to talk about today, I mentioned that I'm the author of a book called It's Deeper Than That. And it is a book about a pathway to vibrant, purposeful, and liberated living and life. In the book, there are 3 sections. One of the sections is very vulnerable. It's about my personal history with sexual abuse and how I was able to start a journey of restoration, transformation, and healing at the age of 20 when I learned about polarity therapy, which I'll say a little bit more about in a minute. Then, in the second part of the book, it's about really learning about the system of polarity, which the the deeper tenet of polarity is that there is a way that we are designed through an energy system that operates inside of us that gives us the gift of life. And it says that soul consciousness operates through form to remember itself, which means that it's possible in this human life to use our attention to focus on the fact that there is an energy force inside of us that gives us the gift of life. And we have the opportunity to know it consciously and realize the radiant power that lives inside of us and gives us life. And so I teach about that part in the book. There's videos, and there's also lots of ways to learn how to apply this to practical life. And then in the last section of the book, it is about with the understanding that energies in everyone and everything, that our social systems don't reflect that. And I take everyone on a journey through my own fracturing of that understanding to recovering that understanding, and how what hurts me hurts you, and together we can build a different kind of future with that understanding. And I know I'm saying a lot right now, but the book is deeper than that. It does use the word soul, soul consciousness, and it is about energy, and it is about healing and transformation and a vision for the future. And it's my legacy work. I've been doing this work for 52 years behind the scenes while I've been running a coaching and consulting company. And now I'm also excited to launch The Great Reconnection. It's actually the next book I'm writing. And the Great Reconnection is in service from listening to my coaching clients who have been talking about a gap inside of themselves while they're leading. And they will say things like, I feel disconnected from myself while I'm having to navigate challenging circumstances in the world. Or I feel a gap between what I know is true inside myself and how I'm performing and producing in the world. They might say, I quiet myself in meetings because I don't trust what I have to say is valid. And so I pretend like I don't know what I know because it might upset the cart or something. Or I'm not being authentic. And it just begged to me, why is it within the world of leadership that people feel like they have to deny who they are and what they know, and that people are exhausted, people are burnt out, I found research that said 60% of the workforce feels burnt out. They're not accessing a renewable energy source that's inside of them. They're not stopping to go to the gas station, or even in a marathon, they have refueling stations so people can sustain a marathon. People aren't stopping and pausing to reconnect with the vital force of energy that's inside of them to be sustainable. And I'm so curious about what it is about leadership that we think that we have to leave ourselves behind and perform and produce. And while I'm preparing even for the podcast today, or preparing, how do I bridge the worlds between my business of unifying solutions as a coaching and consulting company with this book that's coming out that talks about soul and healing and transformation and the possibility for social fabric to look more humane and sustainable through mimicking biodiversity of a forest? And what is the intersecting point of those two things? So I thought I'd stop for a second here and talk about how I define soul, because I think soul often has a connotation to spirituality or religion or something that doesn't seem like it belongs in the workplace. And for me, that is not what soul is to me. Soul to me is literally a vital energy force that I didn't create, that somehow some source of life that gives life to all of creation is also inside of me as an energy force. And the reason why I say that, we don't call birth till we take our first breath here. And when our last breath happens, we die. So what is the very thing that lets our heart beat so that we actually can live here? And it has to be an energy force, an energy current, and operating inside of us that's deeper than the physical heart, that lets the electrical current let our heart beat. And I was a lover of physics when I found Polarity, and it was talking about how energy operates in our physical form, mimicking a battery. And I saw that, oh, there has to be a positive pole and a negative pole. And in order for energy to move, that's what has to happen. And I saw that through the system of polarity, that the positive pole was soul. So what it meant to me was that there's a power of energy that's a positive pole that sends energy through a negative pole, which is form or the material world. And just like an alternating current, it goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And I became curious. Okay, if that is true, if there's a current running inside of me, I want to know what that is. I want to know if it's true. I decided, you know, for those of you that might or might not know, I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse with very complicated circumstances that, in order to survive, my mind took on the repetition of that I must be horrible, that a family member would do this to me and I should sacrifice myself, and dying seemed better than whatever I was experiencing. So my mind just swirled in that loop of, see, you're a terrible person. You're horrible. You should die. Dying is better than being here. And it just kept looping and looping and looping. And when I found this energy system design, I started looking at it and I was like, I want to know if that's true. And I thought, well, my body can be a laboratory. I can do some research and go inside and see if I can experience this pulsing current inside of me. And I had studied enough to know that energy has to move through a liquid medium in a battery, and inside of us, it's through our cerebral spinal fluid. So I was like, okay, let me see if I can get still enough to experience the pulsing of that energy. So nature has always been restorative for me. And so I took myself to the redwoods in California. It was on a fire road and eucalyptus trees. And I just laid on the earth for a while until I could start to feel a pulsing inside of me. And once could experience that, and I think we all have moments where we have access to that, whether it's having a breathtaking sunset or seeing a rainbow or a double rainbow or somebody saying something really touching to you, everything pauses for a moment and there's a hum or a pulse when everything goes quiet. And for me in that moment, everything went completely quiet and I could just feel and experience this pulsing energy like the waves of the ocean. And so then I knew that the laws of energy, like a battery, were operating inside of me. And having that experience gave me a way to then restore my mind because how could this incredible radiant power that's so vibrant and vital and intelligent be inside of me and me be horrible? I knew my mind was lying, but I didn't have any other way to restore it for me, I needed that experience so that I could tell my mind, like, this isn't actually true. And it took me a long time to create a bridge between those realities, but I needed both the experience and the living model of understanding that my soul is a positive pull. It's an energy force that's sending through me. And what disrupts it and interferes with it is the mind, just like my mind was interfering with my experience of it because of what it was telling me. For me, the Great Reconnection is about anyone having the opportunity, instead of abandoning themselves, to have access to that power that's self-renewing and self-refueling inside, that is intelligent, that is knowing, that when any of us listen to it, we can align or organize ourselves around the way that I would say we're made. That's how I call it. But there's a way that, I'm most alive contributing in a certain kind of way. And that gives me something that I deeply care about, something that I stand for, and a way that I contribute to make this world a better place. And it's meaningful because then I'm aligned and resonant within myself at my core. And then I become more magnetic and more compelling because I'm aligned and attuned to the power that's inside of me. And then it becomes magnetic resonance. And do you have a question here, Monu?
I was actually wondering about something you said earlier. Thank you for sharing all that, by the way. I'm just like, I'm so in it with you and like really touched by everything you're saying. But, you've been using this phrase, restore your mind. What does that exactly mean? Because I think when we
Yeah.
think about the mind, we think about thoughts, we think about ideas, like that's what the mind generates. I think that's how a lot of us think about the mind. So, so when you use that phrase, restore your mind, what exactly are you saying there?
That's great. I'm going to use the battery with the mind. So I'm going to do about the mind in two different ways. In order for the soul to send freely through form, so we can have direct contact with our deepest selves, the mind needs to be neutral or still. That's how the soul can send freely, but the mind gets fascinated by the material world through our senses, and also we start looking to the external world for a value, for our identity, for the proof of who we are, for our worth, and we start externalizing our value with our mind, interpreting and identifying. and start losing contact with ourselves. So restoring the mind is restoring the mind towards neutrality, but I'm going to talk about the battery of positive, negative, and neutral within the mind. So we have a positive pole and a negative pole and a neutral gradient within the mind, and the positive pole would be your superconscious mind or your higher self. And your neutral mind would be your conscious mind, which, if it were conscious, it would be having the power to observe, to be
Okay.
non reactive, to be um, listening and curious, to check biases and preferences, to see clearly. And then we have the unconscious mind, which is the negative pole, which is really meant to let the unconscious functions of our body happen, like breathing and digestion and absorption. But when we hold unconscious material, like I would say, hating myself and wanting to die was both unconscious and conscious
Mm,
at the same time, but it had a weight to it because it wasn't aligned. It wasn't neutral. It wasn't being informed by the higher self. It wasn't being informed by the nature of the soul itself, which is maybe the eternal essence of love or something like that, that's
right.
impartial and loving. And so restoring the mind means checking what your mind is doing, and is it in alignment with the higher self? Is it in alignment with what I would call soul qualities? Is it curious, or is it telling you lies to yourself? And are you treating yourself worse than you treat other people? Those kinds of things. But we have to look at what is our mind doing, and how is it driving us to lead and react, instead of recovering to, let me be curious here and see if I were going to bring curiosity here to an interaction, can I be curious about somebody else's lived experience? Can I be curious about my own sense of self instead of just repeating what I'm saying to myself? Can I? So when I say restoring the mind, it's actually bringing the mind back to its rightful place of a more still, or, there's so much about mindfulness right now. Like, can I observe? Am I observing what my mind is doing, or am I just on a repetitive loop that
Right.
is, I would say, life draining and not life giving? Does that help?
Yeah, and so like would you say that like how would one know that they're doing that? Like if
Mm.
they are in that loop, right? Of, to use your example of, I'm worthless, I must have done something wrong, I deserve this, right? Um, and then to take that step to say, okay, I want to restore my mind as you've described it. Would they take that step to then say, okay, I'm just observing what I am feeling? Like, how do you kind of check in with yourself and say, oh, this feels correct what I'm doing, that my mind is coming into a more neutral place. It's aligned with my unconscious and also my superconscious at the same time. Like how could people check inside themselves to feel that, or whatever your experience of it is?
I think what has to happen is that you hit up against the same thing over and over again, and it's not working. And the cost of that is greater than the benefit of it. And there's wanting of something more for oneself. I
Yeah,
think there has to be a cost of something, or people don't change.
right, right,
And for me, I think that um, I, some part of me was always attuned to something else. When I was being abused, I went to an altered state of consciousness where I knew wholeness and holiness. I knew I knew the power of the source of life. And
right.
so some part of me knew that, but I thought it was in association to my trauma. I didn't understand that I was actually getting access to truth. So some part of me was seeking a way to have understanding of something that I didn't even know I was seeking. honestly, I wasn't meaning to find this in any kind of way, but I think that when there's some kind of longing inside of us, it works on our behalf in spite of us. And that's the best thing I can say, how fortunate I am to have found a scientific way of talking about health and healing at the age of 20 uh, to help me find a way to my own vibrancy, to my deeper purpose, and to my own liberation, where I just feel so grateful. I'm 72 and I'm vibrant. I'm active, I'm vibrant, I'm passionate about life, I'm passionate about people having access to their deepest self. I know what's possible and I want it for those that are ready for it.
Right.
And I want the great reconnection. I was just working with a coaching client today and who's getting ready to start a new position. And I'm like, you know who you are. You've been hiding it at work. You get to go into this new position knowing who you are and wearing who you are.
So let me ask you a question
Yeah.
here, right? Why is that important? Why is that actually important? So, I was thinking
Okay.
about this and I was thinking so many of us go in, have day jobs, whatever our interests might be, whatever our home environment might be like. But we go into an office or a workplace expecting, in the systems or models that we work in, that we will kind of leave all of that behind us and show up as a quote unquote professional,
And
regardless of,
producer.
and a producer,
Yeah.
right? Regardless of industry, regardless of what your
Yeah.
training is. But that's the expectation. And that the workplace itself has its own culture and a set of values that we're expected to uphold. So if that's sort of the contract that we've entered into, as working folks, in this time and place, why do you think it's important for us to be able to access like who we truly are, even if we have just a kind of unconscious sense of that and be able to um, express that in at work? Why does that matter?
Well, I might change the word express to know it while you're at work.
Okay, yeah, yeah,
Because if through it's deeper than that pathway, how do you have a pathway to the vital force that's inside of you as a resource? If the source of life for all of creation is sending through you all the time, there's an infinite supply. Why not refuel and be restored by inside so you're sustainable? So it's about your sustainability, number one. I can rest and produce at the same time. Most people are not resting, they're enduring, they're working really hard, they're burning out. There is a way to have access to the energy refueling inside yourself while you're producing high performing results. That's possible. And that's what I'm saying, so that you're sustainable.
mm,
Also, not only are you more sustainable, the deeper contact that you have inside yourself, you don't have to talk about it, but you become more compelling.
right,
You're a force to contend with. And
right.
people will follow you more. When I went to the leadership at Strozzi Institute, we back then we worked with horses. So we would go in a ring by ourselves with the horse. And if I was grounded and magnetic and on purpose with my intention and my internal value, the horse would follow me. And if I wasn't, it wouldn't follow.
Right.
So we had a where the rubber hits the road. Are you aligned? And are you leading with meaningful purpose? I believe will have greater impact. I believe we would build cultures where people felt more engaged because they too could come with their aliveness.
Mm,
I believe that we would have people that were you were retaining people longer because they would feel like I get to be myself here. I don't have to talk about it, but I can allow myself to be restored and on purpose, and I would be more alive and contributing and engaged. And I think that dulling our own aliveness does what?
Yeah.
I
No,
mean,
I
does what?
agree with you. Yeah.
You know, it's, it saddens me to hear the cost to people, to their own selves, and the suffering that they're in, and they spend a lot of time at work. And if you are the CEO or you are managing a group of people, they will follow what you're living. So if your nervous system is not regulated, guess what? Your team won't be regulated. And people will
Yeah.
be living with reactivity and defensiveness and, you know, hiding themselves. And it's just, it's not a positive culture to be in. And I have worked with CEOs and executive directors that have decided that their presence mattered and their organizations functioned very differently.
Yeah. I mean, I think presence is a word that shows up a lot in leadership circles and leadership skill development and things like that. Um, and I think we've all had that experience of having, or many of us have had the experience of working for people or with people who you can sense even before they say anything, where they are. Like if they are connected to their deepest self, as you say, you're able to sense that, right?
Mhm.
And there's sort of an almost immediate kind of trusting that begins to develop. In the relationship. But one of the concepts you talked about that you mentioned that I find really interesting is this idea of resting, like resting while you're in motion or resting while you're
Yes.
producing. I think that's what you said. Um, what does that look like? I don't even, I think for many of us, we
Right.
don't even, resting means taking a nap,
Right. No, no, no. Yeah, I
What
realize that.
what
Yeah.
does that mean? What do you mean when you say that?
Well, for me, resting has a very different connotation. If we look at the nervous system, once again, we have the battery of positive, negative, and neutral in every aspect, micro and macro of life. So you have the sympathetic nervous system, which is, fight or flight and should be from an adrenalized state. We have the parasympathetic nervous system, which is once again that unconscious, digestive, like, you know, not alarmed state. And then we have the neutral state, which is the cerebral spinal fluid or the cerebral spinal. It's stillness.
Mm.
So maybe what I mean by rest is stillness at the center of our being, or stillness is restful. So we
Yes.
want a still, restful way of being. And we want our mind to be still and restful as much as possible so that we can listen and have clarity and uh, not be impulsive or reactive. And it's so to me, resting is more about like, not like I'm resting, but I'm actually, I do this all the time. I'm really, some part of me, you can't see it, but some part of me is tracking the stillness inside of me while we're talking right now. And some part of me is experiencing the pulsing of my own soul while we're talking, and I'm enjoying it. I don't say it out loud, but that's where I sit when I'm coaching, or that's when I'm facilitating, or whatever. I'm always tapping into that current inside of me because it's delicious. It's vital. It restores me. It makes me happy. And I don't want to miss my own life. My life is living inside. I mean, this current is inside of me. My circumstances change all the time and I can't control them, but
Mm.
I can control where my attention is inside of me. And I don't want to miss that. My childhood was too hard. Once I found this treasure, I was like, I'm going for the treasure. I
Right.
want the treasure.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. So how do you think, like, how do you envision this um at work? Like being able to be still inside of yourself, being able to have your mind be clear and not be pulled by things outside of yourself. I would imagine, like I'm imagining myself in my job, that it would um, help me make better decisions because um, I'm less distracted by other things. But like, what do you think? Like, what is your vision for leaders, wherever they might be, whatever fields they're working in, having access to that stillness? How might that change the way that they're showing up at work?
Well, first of all, they have to practice it
Mm,
because we're not trained to tune into that stillness inside, and they have to decide why it matters to them to have access to their stillness and the vital power of energy that's inside. So that's first of all. What do I think it will provide? It would provide sustainability and leadership. I think it would provide higher performance, honestly,
mm.
less efforting and more focus, less hardworking and more focused and deliberate and intentional in a way that's more life giving instead of draining. I think that, like I said, I think they'd be more compelling and on purpose, and people would know how to coordinate with them because they would know what they cared about and what they stood for and what their vision was clearly. And
Right.
they would be congruent. So their vision and their strategy would be congruent with the inside of them. There wouldn't be a gap. I have just was working with someone who's what their CEO said they cared about and the way they were behaving, they weren't connected.
Mm.
And so that doesn't produce trust. So you need behavior and action to follow integrity, alignment, and value and purpose to become trustworthy. And I think that that alignment happens internally, otherwise, we're performing it. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think it's really helpful and I think it's really powerful. It's
I want to put the soul into leadership, which means I want people to have access to the vital force that's inside of them. I want people to have access to the inherent intelligence and wisdom that's inside of them and to help be guided by that. Because otherwise, the ego is leading everything, and the ego can take us down roads that aren't life giving. And I think if each of us becomes more life giving, how does that affect the whole of all of us?
right. The entire culture can be
Yeah,
transformed in such a
exactly.
significant way.
I am feeling like this is a good place for us to pause here with the putting the soul back into leadership, or not
Mm,
even putting it back, the reconnection, bringing
right.
soul into leadership, bringing vitality and vibrancy and purpose and liberation for it's not just personal, it's collective, but let's reframe leadership in a way that is part of the Great Reconnection. And for me, that's how it's deeper than that connects to leadership and the bridge. If I were going to ask you how do you see those two being bridged from being in this conversation today, what would you say?
I would say that for me, first, it requires like an awareness that this is even something that's possible, um, and a desire or a pull, like you said at the beginning of our conversation, right? Kind of getting to a point where you keep trying to do the same thing and you keep doing the same thing and it's not working anymore. So like now you have a desire to change. Um, and then and then practicing, practicing getting still, practicing bringing my mind into a place where it's more of an observer rather than something that's kind of pulling me along or keeping my thoughts in a loop. And yeah, and then just sort of feeling for like how that is shifting things for me in terms of how I'm showing up, um, wherever I might be leading, at work, in a family, in a community. Um, I think that it feels really necessary if I want to be, people talk about authenticity all the time and kind of throw that word around, but I feel like this is really the way to be as aligned um, aligned with the way that we are we're sort of made, going back to that polarity system design that you were talking about. And I think that that gives us the energy and
Mm.
course correction, to be able to show up in the ways that we want to, um, for positive, for in a generative and positive way.
Thank you, everyone, for listening here today. Subscribe below. There's way more to come. And if you'd like to sign up for a complimentary coaching session, there's a link below. You can also get on the list for It's Deeper Than That. It's a book and documentary. It's going to be aired October 15th if you can't be with us in Columbus, Ohio at 6 o'clock Eastern Time. We're so excited for everything that's coming. It's Deeper Than That and the Great Reconnection. There's so much more to come.